behind the scenes.
Okay, so I've hit the live button. I have to do my usual thing of checking my page, because if I don't, everyone's going to be so upset because and bored, because they like to see me checking my page, even though they're not technically seeing me what I'm looking at.
They know.
But okay, we're there. We're in business. Hi, everyone in Facebook land and whatever land you happen to be in. I'm Mitzi Szereto, and I'm back for another Facebook Live event. And it is for my most recent release, The Best New True Crime Stories, Crimes of Famous and Infamous Criminals. And we do not have a criminal on with us today, but we have one of our wonderful contributors from the book, Alisha Holland, who's coming to us from the Pacific Northwest.
That's right. Hi, everybody.
Thanks for coming on. It's not raining, is it?
It's not. We're actually getting, we're at the first day of what's next to be like our first big heat wave of the summer. So
yes, the week of hell that is upcoming.
Yes.
Yeah. No, I don't think anyone is looking forward to it. I mean, people in the Pacific Northwest are so thrilled to see sun, but then there's kind of that limit where it's like, okay.
Yeah.
I think I've got enough skin cancer for the week.
Yeah, I like sun in April and May and September, October.
Yeah. I usually hide in the summer. Yeah. Oh, well, you've written a really good story. And actually, we had a conversation when you were pitching ideas, and I remember you mentioning to me that a lot of people that you'd spoken to hadn't heard about this case, which surprised me. But then again, I'm kind of a vintage Hollywood person, and I know a lot of people who I was nowhere near alive when they were popular. But so tell us a bit about the subject of our story. Your story is called Life of the Party.
Yeah.
And the story is about Roscoe Fatty Arbuckle, who was a big star of the silent film era. So give us a bit of an overview. And I won't call him Fatty, because I know that's not a really dignified thing to call him. And I mean, people got away with things like that in the past. So we'll call him Roscoe.
Yeah, and the fact that it really originated with his father, and it was a derogatory term, and it just kind of stuck with him. So yeah, I tried to do the same also in the book. I tried to reference him as Roscoe specifically. Yeah, I was really excited. So we actually met because of my true crime podcast, and we were just talking about that before coming on, how you had actually done an interview with us for one of your stories, and which, we're so appreciative of. And you had mentioned about getting submissions, and I've always wanted to be a writer, and was like, okay, I could try that, and was really excited about it. And you made it so easy, and it wasn't intimidating. It was just like, oh, I can do this. And so, yeah, you had asked about celebrities, and of course, there are the ones that everyone kind of goes to. It's like, okay, OJ or Snoop Dogg or, Martha Stewart. And so I was like, I want to go a little deeper than that. And I came across Roscoe on lists, looking up celebrity lists of famous criminals, if you will. And in my mind, same as you, I was like, oh, that's kind of an old story of, hey, I even remembered it from being a kid of, oh yeah, he squished an actress. What I had always heard was, oh, he was so fat that he squished this actress and she died, and that ended his career. And so I kind of thought that's where this was going. And I started asking, I even asked my own mom, who has never shied away from old TV or anything. And so I thought she would have been like, oh yeah, everyone knows that. She's like, who? And that was super. So that for me was like, okay, I've got to do this story. And then the more I read about it, and how through the years and through rumor mills and through media, it had become Fatty Arbuckle smashed, squished a waitress or an actress. And then looking back, it's, oh, Fatty Arbuckle was maybe like kind of framed for doing that. And studios were maybe worried about their money and wanted him to not be so famous. And other people were in the picture that didn't have the best intentions. So there was just so much more. And like with on the podcast and any true crime, I think once you get more into it, you see there's always so much more to it. There are so many more layers. And so I was like, here we are 100 years later, and we're in cancel culture, which was kind of like the place I started with it. not as an opinion of good or bad, because I think there are good and bad things about cancel culture. But just kind of how easily it can happen, how the intentions aren't always what we want them to be. I think for a lot of us, we think, oh, cancel culture is there to kind of keep everyone in check, but it can be used to benefit those who maybe shouldn't have the benefit. So it just seemed like appropriate. 100 years later, here we are still talking about people that are wronged by other people.
Yeah, I mean that was the thing that when you pitched your story, and I said, well, Fatty Arbuckle, Roscoe Fatty Arbuckle's been written about so many times, so much content out there, and so what can we really say that's going to be new? And absolutely, the spin that you put on here about the cancel culture and the Me Too movement, which is a integral part of this story as well, and how that can be abused and has been abused. And this was probably one of the most first big cases of that being abused. But you know exactly what you're saying. I mean, my recollection of the story too, I didn't delve into it too deeply. In the back of my mind, he was this sexual predator who did all these horrendous things to this woman. I mean, there was some pretty graphic stuff that he supposedly did,
Right.
and that unfortunately stuck on him. And the fact that, as it turned out, that it didn't happen, probably a lot less people are aware of that, which is sad.
Yeah.
I mean, he's not alive anymore, clearly, but I mean, to remember an iconic figure like that in that way it's just awful.
Yeah, and that was another part of it. He in his own way was a victim of this system, not in the same way Virginia, the actual woman who passed away, was. But yeah, it's like, because of Roscoe there was Buster Keaton, and because of Roscoe there was Charlie Chaplin. Like, Charlie Chaplin learned the little biscuit dance from Roscoe, and then, so if you think of, well, who learned what from Chaplin and then did that, and then, at what point do we end up at Robin Williams and Eddie Murphy and all of that, so you have to really appreciate those things. And it was sad that I don't want there to be any confusion that my speaking against, like, anyone abusing Me Too or anything like that is saying that that's a common occurrence, because we know that it's not. It was more that, these movie producers were utilizing their pull in the media to get what they wanted. But yeah, he really fell victim to it. There are so many scuzzy guys out there, and there's so many not great people in movies and things like that, that maybe were more deserving of losing their career. And here's this
Yeah.
guy who was too liked and ended up.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, from what you've reported in the story as well, that I mean, he just was someone who went out of his way to help other people who, technically would be competitors, and
Right.
yet he was there to give everybody a helping hand. So it's like, it seems like the more you do to help people, the more kick in the backside you get,
Yeah.
which is, well, that's a whole other story.
Yeah.
So just to give a bit of an overview, so he was accused. So he was accused of having sex with this a bit player, bit actress, bit player, whatever. Virginia, what was it again?
It's Rapé. She added an E to it, and of course, it was noted in many newspapers how her name resembled rape.
Yeah,
Definitely.
yeah. So, I mean, the life of the party was he essentially went from Los Angeles up to San Francisco for a party he really didn't want to go to because he was feeling like crap, right? He had some,
Yes, he actually had a severe injury on his backside,
yeah,
and I believe he had been burned a few days before. So I cannot imagine what it was like. I don't care how fancy his car was; it was still 100 years ago, as were the roads. So
yeah.
that had to be a long car ride.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I
so
mean, LA to San Francisco now is not that big a deal, but can you imagine back 100 years ago how long that took?
that would be an ordeal.
Yeah,
Um, yeah, and he and some buddies just took the holiday week. It was Labor Day weekend, and decided to go up to the hotel, and prohibition was in effect. So they were like, oh, let's go have some booze at the hotel and just have a pretty chill weekend, just drinking and hanging out. And then some other characters showed up that were kind of invited by other people. And and Virginia was there complaining of health issues. There are, again, so many conflicting reports, and again, 100 years ago, that she may have recently have had an abortion and she was having complications from. That was never confirmed. She may have had some other ailment, appendicitis or something along those lines that was causing issues. And the story then went that the friend that was with her saw Roscoe on top of her, and she was screaming and trying to get away, and he was basically assaulting her. And then later she was found to be very ill, and they finally took her to the doctor days later, and by then it was too late and she passed away. And by then the media was already saying, Roscoe was raping this woman. He sexually assaulted her to death, basically, because of his weight, which I can't remember the exact number, but it was not a weight that would do that. It was only 300 something, like low 300s weight wise. So, and then it became, at that time, the trial of the century of, here's the world's biggest movies. He was making millions of dollars. Even in then, I believe he was making $1 million a year, which is an unimaginable amount of money. And so you have the truly biggest star in the world, and he's now going on trial for murder. And then back on trial, and then back on trial.
Yeah, well, I mean, for instance, this party. So we had a lot of actresses were showing up, and other people that were almost like this. I mean, in show business, you do have this. There's always these hangers on, these people that just glom onto you, and essentially, this is what happened in the suite, right? All these people just kept showing up, and Roscoe kind of just wanted to be left alone in his BJs.
Exactly. Yeah, and Virginia's friend, the gal that had brought her, they even kind of hesitated to let her in because she was known as not only a hanger-on but a gossip, and she was happy to sell her side of things to anyone who wanted to buy. And so Roscoe especially was hesitant to let her in, to be like, isn't she kind of known for not only being trouble but gossiping to newspapers? And she ended up being one of the star witnesses in the case. And so that was a conflict. And that was the hard part about the word minimum, or the maximum word count for the story. Cause I could have gone on and on about how there's this whole other theory that Paramount at the time, which was paying those huge paychecks, that they had perhaps aided in getting those people to that party, not for Virginia to die, but just, hey, if you could catch Roscoe drinking during Prohibition, that would at least get him in trouble. Maybe not end everything, but at least slow it down. We don't have to uphold the contract with him, don't have to pay him as much. And I wouldn't be surprised if that had been the case.
Yeah, I mean, you put up a good argument in the story about that, and yeah, I mean, he became such a big star and so expensive, and then they're just, well, let's see, how can we bring him down? Save
Which
some money.
eventually led to, because of that case, led to morality causes in future contracts, where
Yeah, I remember
those were
those.
able
Yeah.
to say, okay, well, if you're caught drinking, or if you're an adulterer, or if you don't meet whatever our standards are, then we can cut you from the contract.
Do you know, as an aside, there are actually some publishers who insert morality clauses into their book contracts.
Really?
I ran into one once, and I kind of just said, "Excuse me." This is insane. Well, with somebody I wasn't even going to work with. The contract was so insane, but yeah. Some book contracts have it too, which is just yeah, unbelievable. But I suppose in the entertainment business, we could go on to the McCarthyism and all of that.
Yeah.
It's just,
And I think there's a balance there of what you should expect from your employee, basically.
yeah. Well, I mean, if you're going to go and, I mean, if commit a crime and go out and murder someone or something, I think that'd be a good reason to drop you from the film,
Right. I don't know that needs to be in contract.
Yeah, so stands for reason. Yeah, never mind. We'll cast another actor. So with all of this going on, obviously Roscoe must have been trying to get people to believe his side of the story, but did really anyone listen to him?
I think he had his tight group of people, and like we see today, as soon as something happens, there's a lot of distancing, because then
Hmm.
it can ripple effect, like, whoa, you're still talking to that person? Well, now you're
Yeah.
guilty by association. So he did have quiet supporters. Um, he didn't even really know anything was going on. He was already back home by the time Virginia passed away at the hospital. So he didn't even know that whatever had happened in San Francisco was still percolating. So it wasn't until they were like, hey, can you come back? We need to talk to you. Then he sees in the papers she's died mysteriously, and he's wanted for questioning. And that's how he finds out. So the media was so far ahead of him. They were already telling the court of public opinion what was happening before the person who was going to go to trial for it even knew that something was happening. So I don't know that he could have ever, unless he had stayed in San Francisco, that would have been the only way he could have been ahead of it. Um, After the trials, and he was eventually acquitted. Spoiler, sorry guys, you've had 100 years to find out. Um, Buster Keaton did bring him on, because by then, before everything happened, Roscoe had kind of passed the torch to Buster for his production company and everything. And so he was gracious enough to say, well, I'll return the favor. You'll come back and work with me. And he did some directing, behind the camera stuff for years until his own death. But yeah, I don't know what he could have done that would have changed things, because
Yeah.
he was up against, a lot of big newspapers back then in California, especially. So
Yeah, I mean, it was like a monster media thing, and then all these other people who are telling these stories and whatever. I mean, the group of friends that so-called friends who were in the hotel suite with him. So we've got Virginia's girlfriend, another actress, who
mhm.
was essentially saying, "Oh yes, yes, he did it, he did it." But were any of the other people also on board with the story?
I think she had a gentleman that she was with, and w- sounded like was taking her side. It was all so jumbled that it really was kind of the friend that was telling everyone what was happening. So no one witnessed Roscoe on top of Virginia except for the friend. And so she's the one saying it. And then she's like, oh, she was in the bathroom, or this happened and that happened. And so she was just kind of the one playing telephone. Um, I'm not sure how his friends, even in that moment, how people were feeling, because Roscoe was denying anything, any issue. He wanted her gone. He was calling the hotel nurse people and doctors. He's like, can you come get her? Like, please, she's ill. I don't know her. I don't want her around. This is all mixed up. So, yeah, I'm not sure. And, there are conflicting reports. Like in the book, I talk about how they they thought maybe the moment that the friend was reporting Roscoe as being inappropriate or assaulting her or whatever, you know, depending on which day you were speaking to her, what she was claiming was happening, was that Virginia had passed out, and they weren't sure if she was like totally unconscious or asleep or what was happening. And that it was possible Roscoe had taken some ice and put it on her thigh, because a friend had told him before, like, oh, if you ever want to check, that'll wake somebody right up. And so it was believed that maybe that's what he was doing, and the friend came in at that time. So it truly was an entire case of hearsay, really, because they
Yeah,
had no
I
proof of
think I
it.
remember you mentioning Virginia's friend, the other actress, when she claimed she witnessed this, was actually shagging someone in the bathroom.
Yes, yeah, that was one of the
How did
reports,
she
was
know
like,
that was going on if she was occupied?
exactly, yeah. So she was really kind of the troublemaker of the entire the entire thing. I had a whole nother story in there that again, when it came down to word count and I had to chop like 1,000 words, I'm like, okay, this whole portion is gone. um, where she actually, at the police station the following day or a day after, got into a verbal argument with one of the men from the hotel and was throwing this huge tantrum about the hotel bill and how you guys are going to be paying that. And it just went on to the point that like her purse is flying and like a total scene. And it was just like, your friend is dying and you're worried about a hotel bill. Like, what is the deal here? So
it sounds like she's
a whole other story.
some sort of an opportunist, really. Maybe, I mean, so she was also an actress, right?
Yeah.
I mean, you wonder, was this something that she thought she was going to have some spotlight shown on her and advance her career? Or
it definitely felt that way. It felt more like Virginia went because maybe this was an opportunity, because I do believe of the other guys, there were only a couple men with Roscoe, and I'm blanking a little, but I think they were also in the business, directors or producers or something.
Yeah.
And I felt like in reading things, the sense was Virginia's had it rough. Maybe she was seeing it as some sort of opportunity, probably more for her career, but like, okay, I can meet these guys, introduce myself, whatever. And maybe she had part of that too. You know, some of the opportunity, this is my big break and whatever I got to do and I don't care, or I'll get some dirt and go sell it so I can at least have some money. But yeah, the friend definitely felt a little shadier. There was something else there that just seemed like maybe she was going in with that purpose. Virginia, maybe it seemed like, I'm going to go just see what happens. Whereas the friend was like, I'm going to go and see what I can get from it.
Yeah, with friends like that, right? Who needs
right?
Yeah. Well, in this particular case, then, what did Virginia actually said something that was misinterpreted? Didn't she say something along the fact that he did it or Roscoe did it?
Yeah. So again, that was another report that while she was kind of wheezing and in and out of consciousness, that she was saying, he hurt me, Roscoe did it. And again, as far as I remember, that was reported by that same friend.
Of course. How convenient.
So, yeah.
And technically Virginia died from, was it a ruptured bladder, correct?
Yeah. And again, that wasn't narrowed down to be if that had been from some sort of infection. So she could have had a really severe bladder infection that just wasn't treated. Or again, if she had had an illegal abortion and something had gone wrong and she just never recovered from it.
Yeah. Well, I think in your story, you indicated that there were reports that she'd been plagued with bladder problems for years.
Yeah.
And obviously,
issues.
If you don't sort that out,
and you're drinking, and you know, who knows how hydrated they were being. It was summertime, like a lot of elements. You're drinking alcohol that isn't exactly the most available thing at the time. And so if you're not drinking as much, and then you go and you have some drinks, and that's going to dehydrate you. A lot of elements. Yeah. And she was having other health issues. And so it is just a question of, at what point did it go from the doctor saying she died from this to this man is on trial for murder? How can you kill someone via bladder infection?
Yeah. Well, I mean, there was also the element of that he supposedly raped her.
Right.
Yeah. And not just supposedly even with objects.
Right.
I don't know where that stuff came into how that got into the story. I mean,
yeah. And again, the reporting was, like you said, there's so many stories on it, but if you really get into like just Virginia, there's not as much. And again, it was like, were the things the doctor, first off, was that ever seen? They could have just claimed it. They could have just said like, oh, well, we have a witness that said this was happening. Also, did she have, because of the bladder infections or because of other reproductive things, did she have scar tissue there or previous injuries or old injuries that maybe were showing up as that? There was just no way to tell.
Yeah.
There wasn't really proof of that specifically.
Yeah. I mean, it's just the toward the end of the story too, as well, when it's just such a such a sad ending, that this man who was so loved by everyone basically was blacklisted. And then he at one point he even changed his name to try to do some parts,
Yeah,
right?
he was, I mean, he was happy to do anything back into showbiz. So,
Yeah,
um, like I said, he went back with Buster Keaton to do some directing and writing, and then was still doing whatever he could behind the scenes. It was almost like he was testing the waters. Like, okay,
yeah,
if I'm this visible, is everyone okay with that, or do I need to stay? Okay, what about this? And yeah, he had a celebratory dinner the night before he passed, and was celebrating that he was getting back into doing actual acting, and went home and passed away in his sleep with a heart attack. Yeah,
yeah,
so that is what's hard. I mean, with any true crime, you're going to have victims, and it's extra frustrating when there are multiple victims on both sides, because
yeah.
he was a victim in a very different way than Virginia. I mean, Virginia was a victim, in my opinion, of bad medical care and lack of just getting services and basic needs met. Like, that's what killed her. And
And having an opportunistic friend.
exactly. Yeah. Cause yeah, who knows? I mean, that the vibe of that friend is like, uh, there didn't seem to be a lot she wasn't willing to do. And so
Yeah.
it's like, did you bring your sick friend on purpose? Like, were you hoping things would go really bad, or that she would die in his presence? Like, what was, I'm not sure I'm not sure how much they knew about how sick Virginia was, but um yeah,
Or
it's just yeah.
maybe even the point of perhaps the whole thing was a setup from the start, bringing Roscoe to this party that he did not want to go to,
Right.
and it really just bulldozing into this situation, and having something, staging some kind of action. Even obviously it didn't happen, but that kind of goes back to your argument about did they want to the production companies and the studios wanted to say, okay, this guy's costing us too much, bring him down.
Oh, totally. Like, it wouldn't surprise me if they knew of this woman being how she was, and they were like, "Hey, go get us some dirt on him. Take a friend, go like make it a fun party."
Yeah.
Um and they, I mean, if that was the case, they probably were quite thrilled with how it went, because they certainly weren't, there was nothing to show that anything was set up for a murder. So the fact that someone would die while at this, illegal jazz party with booze, this worst thing imaginable, uh,
Yeah.
then that for them was just a bonus, I'm sure.
Yeah, I mean, the scandal, maximum scandal impact
Oh,
here. Prohibition, booze, famous Hollywood star,
oh,
uh,
and just
hotel.
morality. My God, he was having some drinks with his friends playing cards. How can we trust him to make our children laugh? Like, what?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, he was sort of he had his little things that he did in his films. I mean, he was a very physical comedian. That I mean, he used his size to his benefit in that regard.
Yeah, and that was what so many of the other comedians, well, anyone that worked with him was so amazed by, is here is this big guy, like I said, he was over 300 pounds, but he was so agile, and he could fly and fall and do all of these tricks with his body. And the other part was that it wasn't just like fat jokes.
Yeah,
It wasn't, "Oh, look, I fell because I'm a fat guy." It was, "Oh, I'm falling over this entire like kitchen and landing on my feet, and it's amazing and hilarious." And so he did find this way of kind of like disarming people, I think, with his size, and then shocking them, because they had all, anytime you can hold up someone's expectations and stereotypes to themselves, and they can see and go, "Oh, I really underestimated what that person was going to be able to do." I think that's what really brought joy to what he was doing.
Yeah, I mean, he didn't do a kind, like you were saying a bit about he didn't use comedy as a thing that I'm fat, laugh at me because I'm fat. That wasn't actually what people were laughing at. They were laughing at what he did with himself, how he used his body, but not because he was fat. And that's I think an important distinction.
Yeah, because that's the easy joke, right?
Yeah,
You
the
might as
cheap
well
joke.
make a fart joke or make a whatever, like, that's just the one sitting right there. And so I think that, like, he knew that people would be watching and go, oh, okay, this fat guy, he's going to do whatever. And then he would do the complete opposite. And so it was like this added element of, oh my gosh, I did not expect that. And so he always had kind of this little advantage to the audience, I think.
I wonder how much of his material is easily findable these days, from the films that he did and everything. I mean, I've not
Well,
tried to look, but
yeah, well, what's a shame is, of course, while the trial and everything,
yeah.
and again, the court of public opinion, not the actual court where he was acquitted. Um, so by then they were already burning some master copies of the films and destroying things, and which never makes sense or works. But so there are a few things that are just totally lost, but there's quite a bit still available on YouTube. I think there might be some on DVD or some sort of like compilation, of his catalog. And it is impressive. It's very different. If you're not used to or interested in silent films, it's a very different experience.
Yeah.
Um, but it's important, it's like the more true crime I cover. So now we've been at it like 4 years, and it's funny because we focus on Pacific Northwest, which for us is from Alaska to Northern California, basically. So, we do Vancouver, British Columbia, all of Washington and Oregon. And now 4 years into it, we're getting to a point where names are starting to pop up from other cases, either other perpetrators or, oh, that same school. Or I did one where this one road in Southern Oregon has had like all these tragedies, totally unrelated. And I think it's important to look back, even though this is so old, it's like you can look back and say, well, how is this connected now to all the stuff we do? And what has worked in the justice system then and versus now, what works with celebrities then and now, what works with the victim. I mean, of course, she was re-victimized in court where her life was just like put on display, and she was a secondary thing. She wasn't really important to the story. It was what they were dealing with, but she was just like this thing. And so it's like, it was all these years ago, and it also wasn't. Like, that's just not that long ago. And so to see how things are now, you have to go back and look at kind of where they started.
Well, what's interesting is it can really go either way. I mean, you've got a case like Roscoe's, who, a person who really wasn't, who hadn't done anything, he was not guilty, is basically, and even put the court trials aside, people figured he was guilty. And I'm sure even after the third court case, they still thought he was guilty. And then you have O.J. Simpson, who's got a neon sign above his head saying, I just killed my former wife and her boyfriend, and he gets off.
Yeah.
So in that case, celebrity really benefited him. So
Yeah. 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 It's interesting to watch, especially now. And I feel like between the internet and people just getting fed up with things not working how they should, it's like you're looking closer and closer at things and getting deeper and deeper into things, and to just look and be like, not to be cynical, except that I am, it's like, okay, well, who paid off what lawyer then, and who paid off what judge, and who knew who, or who owed who a favor, and
yeah, yeah,
there's
yeah.
just
And
so many layers.
unfortunately, poor Roscoe, that didn't work to his benefit because despite everything that he had and all the advantages that he had, it's
Yeah,
people weren't giving him a break at all. I mean, to
yeah,
have to go through 3 different trials and it's the same result each time.
yeah. Yeah, I truly, I mean, they really were just after him. And I don't know. There's a lot to learn from it, I think. Good and
Yeah. Yeah, yeah. Well, it probably one of the earliest cases that we know of with the cancel culture. It was cancel Roscoe, Fatty Arbuckle, essentially.
yeah. I mean, he was
Before
really
the facts were in.
yeah, because I mean, that was not long after vaudeville, and so you know, I don't know. I'm not well versed enough to know. Like, did people know nationwide who certain vaudevillian stars were? Like, maybe to a certain degree if they went to like big cities, but he was really one of the first like national, really worldwide superstars. Um, so not only the very first, but also just the first to just be done. They're just like, nope. So,
Yeah, yeah,
and like I said, there are benefits to that because you do get people that, you know, you, you look back at some things and you say, oh, that's just how it was, or that's how they talked, or that's what was acceptable. And now we're trying to correct those things to say, like, well, yeah, actually, we need equality and diversity, and we need to take care of each other. Like, that's okay. And so I think there's a lot to look at from his case of the good and bad, and how it can be used, because once you can weed out those and you go, oh, that's like 1% of cases, be it Me Too or sexual assault claims or anything like that, then you can look at the other 99% that are real and treat them appropriately and with the right kind of justice, hopefully.
yeah, yeah. Well, that's probably the takeaway from this story. Um, Tell us now. Okay, we've been talking about Life of the Party, which is your story in the book, but
In this book, in this
in
book,
that book, yes, that be the one. So you were mentioning, if some people aren't familiar, your podcast, Murder in the Rain, which is a really cool podcast. So why don't you tell us a bit about that? You touched on it, but so you've been going about 4 years now, you said?
yeah, it was 4 years back in April, and that's how we're sitting here right now, is because of the show.
Yeah.
Yeah, so
Yeah,
we
I'll just mention, if people don't know, I was doing it was the first book in the series, which was the serial killers volume. And I was doing an event at Elliott Bay Books in Seattle. And you guys all schlepped up from Portland. And I also had Mike Brown, one of the contributors, who people may know him from the Dark Poutine podcast. Poutine should be a dead giveaway. It's about Canada. And so I had Mike along, and we had a great time with the interview that you put into 2 different episodes, if I recall correctly. So that was
yeah,
really nice. I
yeah, that
appreciated
was
that.
really fun.
Yeah.
That was a great time. That was our first like big expedition, and we did 3 or 4 interviews that whole weekend. We were able to kind of
Yeah, you were doing a whole bunch, I remember. Yeah.
yeah, that was really fun. Yeah, and you and Mike were awesome. That was just a real delight. And we were like, "Oh, this is like real. We're doing like real stuff now."
We're big time now.
And yeah, so we've been at it for about 4 years, and it's myself, my friend Emily, and my partner Josh, and we all got together. And well, Emily and I have been friends about 20 something years now. And 5 years ago, 4.5 years ago, we were on a long car ride, and she was playing a true crime podcast, and I didn't listen. I still don't, because I don't have time. 'Cause I'm writing one. Sorry. And I'm like, sorry. And if I get time to listen to anything, it's not going to be true crime. I need a break.
I
Um,
know what you're saying. Yeah.
and so we were talking about it, and we're like, oh man, the Pacific Northwest. And we just started talking, like, what is with the Pacific Northwest? Like, we have so many killers up here, and why did we grow up loving true crime? And what is the deal? So we started talking. We're like, oh, well, you got the I-5, and you got all these wooded areas, and you've got water, and you've got cliffs and beachside, and just all these reasons why Pacific Northwest has our issues that we do. And so we kind of started joking. We were like, oh, what if we had like a party bus, and we did a tour of these like notorious locations. This was back before we were like smart about, victims and not doing something like that. And we were like, oh, to get people to go, we'd have to do a podcast. Ha ha ha. And then I was like, oh, I had done other podcasts, like comedy ones and whatever, and just for fun. And I was like, oh, I've got a friend who edits and produces. I'm sure he'd be down to help. And that was Josh. And he's like, yep, totally. And it just clicked right away. We kind of didn't even talk out like, well, what should it be like? It was like, okay, I'll do this part. You do that part. Great. And we just got to writing, and we're at 100 and something, 130, 150 episodes, something like that. And yeah, it comes out every week. Josh tends to focus on kind of like, we joke and call it old-timey crimey. He really loves like turn of the century, or the last one he just did was in the 40s. And it's really fascinating because, again, it's like, you'll go, oh, that's why that law came into play. Or I know that name. You mean like from the guy who's named after that building? He was this, attorney general or governor. And so that's really interesting. And then Emily has more of a focus on, especially against children, missing kids, and things of that nature, or kind of like, abusive situations, cult-like situations. And then I find myself drawn to a lot of social justice issues and, police violence and things of that nature. And we just, our number one priority is victims and just being as respectful as we can. When we can reach out to families or when they're willing to talk to us, we'll talk to them. And just making it that like we recognize that we're kind of the last voice for that person. So we take it very seriously and just want to share, like, for me, my stories tend to be, because most of them are, it's like, oh, here's, well, I started a couple weeks ago. I did this one case, and then it mentioned like, oh, they were worried about letting him out. They let this guy out early on parole. We're worried about letting him out on parole. What if he ends up being like so-and-so? Like, well, who the hell's so-and-so? So I got to go look, and I'm looking it up. Oh, he was out early on parole and then he killed a bunch of people. And okay. Oh, he's like so-and-so. Who's that? And so now I have 3 in a row of guys that were paroled early who everyone begged not to be let out, who then went on to murder people. And so it's, I think it's fascinating, and it's always heartbreaking, and just, anytime it's true crime, it's like, these are actual people. And I think people think, oh, you get bogged down with like the death and the darkness and the weight. And it's not even that so much as like, if I have to say one more time that the cop let him off with a warning, or they decided not to have him do his full sentence because of good behavior, even though he had done these atrocious things, he fell through the cracks. Like, that's the stuff that gets tiring, because it's just so upsetting. And it's what I always wonder is just like, why is it that it seems like the only way a man can prove he's not ready to be out of prison is if he kills a woman. Why is that the measurement? Why can't it just be like, finish your sentence? Nope, you got 10 more years. Go finish your sentence. So,
I'm trying to remember, there was a case recently. Oh God, I can't remember where it was. The judge actually was disgusted with the sentence because he says, I'm restricted by the state and this is the maximum I could give you. And no, it's not enough. Do you remember the one? Wasn't it in the Pacific Northwest? Something?
It might have been. That sounds vaguely familiar. Yeah.
Fairly recently. I wish I can remember what it was. They've got laws that restrict the amount of people. Some people really do need to be put away forever.
Yeah.
But it's like, no, that's not humane, apparently. I mean, it's okay. Yeah, and then how many times they go back out?
It does elicit those conversations, because things are not black and white. You can sit there and look at a case. I've got an episode coming out in a couple weeks about a guy who, he was famous for being the youngest person ever sent to Oregon State Penitentiary. He was only 16 years old, and he was sent to prison. He committed a horrible murder, but is 16. What is prison going to do for a 16-year-old? And then when he's out at 30, what would make us think that he would be ready to function in society and not harm more people? And
Yeah.
so it really is like, what are the answers? And we don't have them, but we're
Yeah.
always happy to have conversations. And we don't, all three of us don't always agree on everything. And so, we kind of, so as far as the show itself, we just, each of us, it's scripted. So each of us tell our story. And then we kind of converse for a little bit after that about the topic. And then we have bloopers, which depending on who you are, you love them or hate them.
Bloopers are fun.
You can
Yeah.
fast forward, but
Yeah. Dude,
yeah,
just do an episode of bloopers.
yeah. Well, we do. We have on Patreon, we do all sorts of fun stuff on Patreon. But yeah, we do. We have like the ones that are a little too spicy for our regular show. We put them into, like, we compile them for Patreon, and then Josh puts them all together, and it's like a half hour of nonsense.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's fun to do. It's not fun to do. It's, it's,
Well, I mean, it's sometimes, people they learn something, they may become aware of something they weren't aware of, even as a public service,
yeah.
that this is this particular case and this person's out, and it's like, keep your eyes open, because
yeah. Well, we've had so many amazing opportunities. Like we were saying right before we started, that we started not even a year before the pandemic. And so we really didn't get our feet off the ground. But we've still had so many opportunities to actually help people. So like on Coin, which is our local CBS affiliate, they let us have a True Crime Tuesday every week, which is,
I was on one with you, which was really
yeah,
fun.
exactly. And so it's like, we get to go on, and they are amazing. Like, they have never restricted what we can say or what we talk about, which is really nice for me, because I don't like that. And so they let me go on and say, and I've called out sheriff's departments, and I've called out DAs to say, like, what is the deal with this case? And so to get that out and try to get tips in, we're working with a Washington State right now, trying to get a memorial for some victims that were recovered up there. Just talking with family members, even, when a family member tells you, like, thank you for telling that person's story, like a son, a parent, a sibling, like that's the stuff that's really like the best part of all of it. At the point
makes it worth it.
Of all of it. Yeah, that's why it's like we just want to keep going, because then the more we can do, then the more we can do. And so that's the hope of that.
Yeah. Well, you've got an event coming up that you're going to be doing in Austin, Texas. So, is it a conference?
Yeah, it's a convention. It's
A convention.
the True Crime and Paranormal Podcast Festival in Austin, Texas, August 22nd through 24th, I think. It's that weekend, whatever those dates are. And yeah, we are very excited, because again, with the pandemic, we had all these things planned, and then boom. So we haven't, like, we were invited to go to CrimeCon UK, and we weren't able to go to that. And so that was, we're like, oh, all these chances to meet people. And so we're very excited for this one. These are, I don't know what year of the conference it is, or convention that it is, but these are shows that the people putting on the show are choosing specifically. They're looking for like ethical podcasts, not the kind that are laughing through telling these horrible stories, or just speculating on things. So it's that and paranormal. So I think it's going to be a really fun mix of people. We're so excited to just meet people and talk. And even though we're based and focused on the Pacific Northwest, like, you don't need to know what street I'm talking about or what town I'm talking about. Like, half the towns I talk about, I've never even been to anyway. So it's like, you don't have to know the Pacific Northwest to listen. It's just where we pull our stories from. So to get to go to Austin, I've always wanted to go to Austin. And I'm not sure about Texas heat in August. I'm not
that'll be challenging.
So that'll be cool. And then in September, we're going to be at CrimeCon in Orlando. So
more fun in heat. Yes.
I know.
You go from drying and baking to boiling and
yeah.
sweating.
And I'm like, those are the 2 states we get to go to. We finally
Yeah.
get to travel, and we get to go to Texas and Florida, where there's a travel advisory to Florida if you, like, aren't a neo-Nazi or whatever. Like, all right, this will be fun. But
Oh
outside
God.
of that, inside CrimeCon, I think that's gonna be great. So
Yeah, just
that's
stay in the building with the convention.
yes,
The
yes.
con-
But that'll be cool. I mean, that's like CrimeCon's kind of like the convention for true crime. So excited to just again meet new people and opportunities. You just never know. Like I said, we're talking here because we reached out for the interview for your book, and now I'm adding to your book. I gotta go write for your book right now. Like,
Yeah.
so
Deadline is looming.
I know. So we're very excited to just like get out and just meet people and just get back to life a little bit.
Well, if CrimeCon would go somewhere a bit cooler, I might consider it. But I'm not going to Florida. I spent enough time in Florida.
Well, the book's coming with, so if anyone wants to buy it in Austin or Orlando, it'll be at our merch table with
So
us.
I'll be there in spirit then.
Exactly.
Sounds good. Well, it sounds like 2 really good events, and I'm sure you guys are going to wow the punters.
Yeah, I think it'll be fun.
Yeah, it'll be really good. So, well, I'm so glad you were able to come on. Again, I've been speaking with Alisha Holland from Life of the Parties. That's her story from the best new true crime stories, crimes of famous and infamous criminals.
That's right. Oh, there it is right there.
There's your page.
Wow.
You see, if you sign books, a lot of my contributors who get books and they, if they've got an event in their town or they're at some kind of a conference, they sign their page.
Oh, that's smart.
Just make sure you don't use a pen that's going to bleed really bad. Yeah, that's the drawback. Yeah, be
It makes
careful.
me nervous. I'm like, I'll stick to the front. I'll pretend like it.
Yeah, maybe that's a safer. But put a bit of a tissue behind it just in case. Yeah. Well, thanks again for coming on.
Thank you for
and
having me.
I look forward to seeing your story that you're toiling away on.
I know. Oh, it's much different. Much different than the Fatty Arbuckles. So
yeah, but you had an interesting spin on it, and I like interesting spins.
Yeah, so we'll see.
Yeah. Okay. Well, thanks everyone for watching, and thanks, Alisha, and safe travels and all the best.
Thank you. You too.
Bye.
Bye.